Hi, and welcome to One Life Matters, the podcast that reminds you that your life is worth living with purpose, joy, and authenticity. I'm Trish, a counsellor and life coach, and I'll be sharing down to earth conversations, insights, and tools to help you navigate the ups and downs of life. Whether you're healing from the past, finding your confidence, or simply wanting to feel more at peace with yourself, this is your space. Because you only get one life and it truly matters. Just before we get into this episode, I just want to mention that this podcast is for general information, insight, and reflection only. It's not a substitute for personal therapy, counselling, or medical advice. Today, I want to delve into something I think all of us have experienced at some time or another in our lives. It's something that certainly gets mentioned a lot, but is very often completely misunderstood. Depression. I'm also going to be talking about a water tank. And if that sounds a bit confusing right now, just stick with me. I promise all will be made clear a little later on. Now, depression tends to get bandied around willy-nilly. You hear people say, "Oh God, I feel so depressed," after a rubbish day at work, a bad week, or during a time of feeling flat and fed up. And as much as I'm by no means dismissing how real those feelings are, feeling low can be deeply uncomfortable, heavy, and emotionally draining. But there's an important distinction to be made here. Feeling low is actually part of being a fully functioning human. But let's look at when feeling low isn't depression. Our emotional world was never designed to sit permanently in the land of super positivity, constant happiness, and unlimited high energy. We're rhythmic beings. Our mood, our energy, our nervous system, they all naturally fluctuate. Some days we feel great and motivated, and other days we feel tired, flat, a bit emotionally wrung out. And that in itself isn't depression. Life has a way of knocking the wind out of us sometimes. Stress, lack of sleep, hormonal shifts, relationship wobbles, grief, pressure at work, the endless bloody rain. My God, the list is endless, and all of these can leave us feeling temporarily low. But usually with time, rest, a bit of support or change in circumstances, and a bit of sunshine, that low mood begins to lift. Clinical depression, however, is different, very different. Depression tends to be more persistent, more pervasive, and much less responsive to the usual mood lifters, such as a good film or a catch up with your bestie. Depression doesn't say, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit crap this week." It's more like a heavy fog that won't shift. Now, the reason this distinction really matters isn't to minimize anyone's feelings. In fact, quite the opposite. People who are experiencing normal human dips need reassurance to know that this is perfectly natural. We all feel like this from time to time. However, someone who is experiencing true depression often needs deeper, more structured help. But when we blur feeling low with depression, people can either worry unnecessarily that something is seriously wrong with them, or not realize that they may actually need proper support. And both matter. It's human, like I said, to have dips. It's human to feel fed up. But that in itself, as I've mentioned earlier, isn't depression. And equally, if the heaviness isn't lifting, if the colour seems to have drained out of everything for weeks or months, that's important too and deserves real care and attention. I want to spend a few minutes talking about something that doesn't really get talked about nearly enough when it comes to low mood and depression, and that's anhedonia. It sounds so clinical, doesn't it? But it's something so many people struggle with and get confused with depression. Anhedonia simply means a reduced or inability to feel pleasure from the things that once gave you joy. It's not a real deep, dark sadness exactly, and it's not always distress. It's more like the spark has gone missing. Everything feels grey, dull, blah. It's that strange feeling where the things that normally lift you just don't. For instance, you might notice that food doesn't taste quite the same. Music that usually uplifts you doesn't have any effect. Your favourite program is on, but you're just not interested. People are talking and laughing around you, but inside you feel, I don't know, oddly disconnected. You honestly cannot be asked with just about anything, really. I've had clients describe anhedonia as going through the motions but not quite feeling it. And this is where confusion can creep in. Because people sometimes say, I think I'm depressed, when what they're actually describing is this emotional flatness, a kind of shutdown, numbness. Now, anhedonia can absolutely be part of depression. It's actually one of the hallmark features of depressive states. However, and this is important, it can also show up in other situations too, such as burnout, chronic stress, trauma responses, nervous system overwhelm, grief, and emotional exhaustion. Sometimes the body and the nervous system become so overloaded that they turn the volume down on our emotional world, not because there's something wrong with you, but more so because your flooded system is trying to cope. So, what I often say to my clients is something along the lines of, if your nervous system has been running in survival mode for a long time, it will sometimes prioritize protection over stimulation and pleasure. And when that happens, life can start to feel pretty grey and flat. Very, I can't be asked, and what's the point? Something to point out here is that people with anhedonia and depression often look absolutely fine on the outside. They're still going to work, they're still replying to messages, still functioning, and for all intents and purposes, getting on with it. However, on the inside, it feels like something's missing. There's this weird void, a lack of warmth, joy, just feeling alive, really. And that can feel really scary if you don't know what's going on. So, if this sounds like you might be burnt out, overloaded, and overwhelmed, and your system may be protecting you in the only way that it knows how. But the really hopeful part is this: when the system is supported back into safety, slowly and consistently, that capacity for pleasure and engagement can begin to return, but it will probably take its own sweet time to get there. So, we've taken a brief glimpse at anhedonia, and now it's time to put the spotlight on depression. While feeling sad or flat is a reaction to either a specific event or to things that you usually enjoy, depression is a persistent state of being. It isn't just a low mood. Depression is a systemic shutdown of your emotional, physical, and cognitive systems. It's the body's battery safe mode gone wrong, where the lights are dimmed so low, it's like you can no longer see the exit. It can feel like you're wearing a lead suit. Everything feels heavy, even your limbs, to the point that every movement, getting out of bed, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, takes 10 times the energy it should. And it can feel like you're behind a glass wall. You can see people laughing and living on the other side, but you can't quite reach or connect to them. You feel a profound sense of isolation, even in a crowded room. Depression can bring on like a cognitive fog. It's not just being slow, it's the inability to make simple decisions like what you want to eat, and that's if you want to eat anything at all. The world becomes a dark place, lifeless, joyless, and in extreme cases, it can feel pointless too. In psychology, there's a framework that I want to focus on, and it explains exactly how we get to this breaking point. It's called the stress diathesis model, or in other words, the stress bucket model, but instead of bucket, I'd rather refer to it as a water tank. It explains the exact tipping point where normal, everyday stress crosses the line into clinical depression. And here's how that system works. Now, I haven't got a bit bonkers, just stay with me on this, but I want you to think of your mind as a water tank. We all have one, and right at the bottom of that water tank, there's usually some residue. These are our early experiences, past trauma, our childhood environment, leaving a bit of sediment at the bottom. What that means is your water tank starts out a little less than empty, so it fills up faster. Then comes the water, and the water represents our current triggers, the chaos of modern life, job loss, grief, chronic stress, or even a sudden hormonal shift. It's constantly pouring in, and when that water tank finally overflows, your nervous system decides that the safest, most logical thing to do is simply shut down to protect itself. And that shutdown, that's what we call depression. Let's break down exactly how this works because understanding it changes everything. Firstly, that water tank represents our vulnerability and our unique capacity as to how much stress we can hold before we overflow into a mental health crisis. Now, size matters here, but it's completely out of our control. Because of genetics and brain chemistry, some people are born with a giant 10-litre water tank, while others are born with a 2-litre water tank. And I really want to emphasize that having a smaller water tank isn't a personal failure, it isn't a weakness. It just means your nervous system is naturally more sensitive to the environment. But here's the catch. Before we even reach adulthood, most of our tank already has sediment sitting at the bottom. And that sediment, as I mentioned earlier, is a mix of the DNA you were born with, your childhood experiences, developmental trauma, or long-term health issues. And all of that determines exactly how much room is left in your tank for adult stress. If you have a 5-litre water tank, but there's already 3 litres of sediment from a difficult upbringing, you only have 2 litres of space left for real life before you overflow. And I think this explains so much, doesn't it? It explains why someone might seem to completely snap over something relatively small. It was never about that final small thing. It was about the total lack of space left in their water tank. The water is life itself. This is the stress part of the equation. It's everything happening to you right now. And it comes in 2 different speeds. First, you have the slow drips. This is the daily grind, bad traffic, a messy house, minor work stress, the everyday pain in the arse stuff. Then you have the power hose. These are the massive hits: bereavement, divorce, losing a job, major health issues. And the key insight here is that our systems can actually handle a power hose for a little while if the water tank is empty enough. But if those daily slow drips never stop, even without the power hose, the tank is going to fill up. And when that water finally reaches the brim and spills over the sides, well, that's depression. It's your emergency broadcast system saying, I can't hold any more. I'm shutting down to prevent further damage. This is exactly why someone in the middle of a depressive episode feels like they can't even handle a simple text message or phone call. Their tank is literally at maximum capacity. Even just one more single drop of water feels like an absolute threat to their survival. I can remember being in a depressive state when all I wanted to do was stay under the duvet, undisturbed by the outside world, when even the thought of getting out of bed to take a shower or even brush my teeth felt far too much of a mission. And looking back, I used to beat myself up so much over that and telling myself how disgusting and lazy I was. But it wasn't laziness, it was the overflow. The mental and physical energy required just to stand up and face the sink was equivalent to trying to climb a mountain. When you're at absolute capacity, your brain doesn't see a toothbrush. It sees an insurmountable task. It sees a threat to the tiny shred of energy you have left to keep yourself alive. Living under that duvet was the only way my system knew how to put up a do not disturb sign and stop any more water from getting in. If you've ever been there, or if you're under that duvet right now listening to this, I want you to know that your system isn't broken, it's just full. And that's exactly why we need to talk about how we start to drain it. So, how do we empty the water tank? And this is the part I love sharing because it's where hope lives. We can't always change the original size of our tank, and we can't rewrite history to erase the sediment that's already sitting there. But what we can do is install a tap. Think of the tap as self-care, boundaries, maybe therapy. Things like regular exercise, a healthy diet, a decent amount of sleep, and learning to say no. They act as release valves at the bottom of the water tank. They allow the water to drain out just as fast as life is pouring it in. Focus on identifying those slow drips you can actually turn off, the unnecessary stresses, those toxic boundaries, or the overachieving mindsets that we can actively change. Unlike a sudden crisis, slow drips are the sneaky, low-grade drains on your energy that you've lightly tolerated for so long, they now feel normal. To find them, look for the micro stresses in your day-to-day routine, such as the boundary drip. This shows up as the recurring favor you don't want to do, but say yes to anyway. It's the co-worker who consistently dumps their last-minute tasks on your desk because they know you'll sort it out for them. Or the friend who uses you as an emotional dumping ground without ever asking how you are. And then there's the people-pleasing drip. This is the constant quiet anxiety of walking on eggshells just to keep everyone around you happy. It's the chameleon effect, where you find yourself changing your opinions, your tone, or your plans just to avoid a split second of awkwardness. It's that exhausting mental loop running in the background of your mind. Are they mad at me? Did I say the wrong thing? You spend so much energy managing everyone else's mood that you completely lose track of your own. And then there's the just a little more perfectionist drip. This is the internal voice whispering that your best or good enough isn't enough. It's rewriting a perfectly good email 4 times before sending it, or obsessing over minor flaws that no one else will ever notice. And that's the thing about these micro stresses. Whatever the drip is, it leaves you feeling overwhelmed and exhausted with life in general. Ask yourself, does this situation leave me feeling lighter or heavier after I engage with it? If you consistently feel even a tiny bit heavier, you found a drip, and by shifting your focus to these manageable leaks, you stop waiting for life to magically become less stressful, and instead you start actively reclaiming your peace, one turned off valve at a time. And second, and this is where we go a little deeper, we need to work on cleaning out that old sediment at the bottom. By processing past traumas and understanding your history, we actually create more space for the present day. This is where the deeper and admittedly much harder change takes place. Managing the daily influx of water is a great skill, but if half your tank is already filled with hardened, forgotten sediment from years ago, you're operating at half capacity even before your day begins. That sediment is made of old coping mechanisms, unaddressed hurts, and survival strategies that saved you in the past but are suffocating you now. It's incredibly stubborn. It's been sitting there for years, compacted by time, until it feels less like baggage and more like just who you are. And because it's familiar, your brain will often fight to keep it there. Change, even positive change, can feel like a threat to a system that has survived a certain way for a long time. When you first start chipping away at it, the water might actually look muddier for a while, but that's okay. It's a sign that you're finally loosening what's been stuck. You have to trust the process. Breaking down decades of sediment doesn't happen with one swift movement. It happens through steady, compassionate persistence. And as you safely process those older stories, you'll find that you don't start your mornings already on the brink of being overwhelmed. You build a deeper, more resilient reservoir, giving yourself the actual breathing room you deserve for the here and now. And remember, just as those negative drips can quietly add up, the reverse is also true. Look for little goblets of joy or peace every single day, no matter how small they seem. Whether it's a quiet cup of coffee or a moment of deep breathing, these moments have a calming, layered effect over time. They act like fresh, clean water entering the system, diluting the stress and helping you reclaim your peace. As we wrap up today, I just want to take a second to look directly at whatever space you're in right now. If your room is a mess, if you haven't moved from the couch, or if you've been staring at the wall for hours, that's okay. You don't have to fix everything today or in one go. Depression makes the smallest steps feel like climbing a mountain. And if all you did today was survive, then please count that as a massive victory. You're not a burden and you're not broken and you're absolutely not navigating this dark place alone. Take it one breath at a time and please be gentle with yourself. And before you go, please know I'm wishing you the space to completely empty that tank, pour out the heavy stuff, and return to a place of peace. Until next time, take care. Thank you for joining me on One Life Matters. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love you to subscribe and maybe share it with someone who might need it too. And remember, you only get one life, so make it one that truly matters. Until next time, take care of yourself.